What you doing in my place? Undine held up a hand. He came to apologize, Sidney. Son moved aside so he would not be standing between them and said, Yes, sir. Anything you got to say to me or my wife, you say somewhere else. Don't come in here. You are not invited in here. It was Jadine, Son began. She suggested, Jadine can't invite you in here. Only I can do that. And let me tell you something now. If this was my house, you would have a bullet in your head, right there. And he pointed to a spot between Son's eyebrows. You can tell it's not my house because you are still standing upright. But this here is. He pointed a finger at the floor. Mr. Childs, you have to understand me. I was as surprised as anybody when he told me to stay. Sidney interrupted him again. You have been lurking around here for days. And a suit and a haircut don't change that. I'm not trying to change it. I'm trying to explain it. I was in some trouble and left my ship. I couldn't just knock on the door. Don't hand me that mess. Save it for people who don't know better. You know what I'm talking about. You was upstairs. I was wrong, okay? I took to stealing food and started wandering around in here. I got caught, okay? I'm guilty of being hungry and I'm guilty of being stupid, but nothing else. He knows that. Your boss knows that. Why don't you know it? Because you are not stupid, and because Mr. Street don't know nothing about you and don't care nothing about you. White folks play with Negroes. It entertained him. That's all, inviting you to dinner. He don't give a damn what it does to anybody else. You think he cares about his wife? That you scared his wife? If it entertained him, he'd hand her to you. Sidney. Undine was frowning. It's true. You know him all this time, and you think that? She asked him. You tell me, he answered. You ever see him worry over her? Undine didn't answer. No, you don't. And he don't worry over us neither. What he wants is for people to do what he says do. Well, it may be his house, but I live here too, and I don't want you around. Sidney turned back to Son, pointing at him again. Mr. Childs, Son spoke softly but clearly. You don't have to be worried over me either. But I am. You the kind of man that does worry me. You had a job, you chucked it. You got in some trouble, you say, so you just ran off. You hide. You live in secret, underground, surface when you caught. I know you, but you don't know me. I am a Philadelphia Negro, mentioned in the book of the very same name. My people owned drugstores and taught school while yours were still cutting their faces open so as to be able to tell one of you from the other. And if you looking to lounge here and live off the fat of the land, and if you think I'm going to wait on you, think twice. He'll lose interest in you faster than you can blink. You already got about all you can out of this place, a suit and some new shoes. Don't get another idea in your head. I'm leaving, Mr. Childs. He said he'd help me get a visa, something, so I can get back home. So you don't need no visa to go home. You a citizen, ain't you? Well, I use another name. I don't want nobody checking me out. Take my advice. Clean your life up. Son sighed. He had told 6 people in 2 days all about himself, had talked more about himself than he had in years, and told each of them as much of the truth as he had to. Sidney, he knew from the start, would be the hardest to convince, but he kept calling him Mr. Childs and Sir, and allowing in gestures how he was a reprobate, and ended by asking them both if they knew somewhere else he could sleep while he waited for Mr. Street to get the visa and some identification for him. Outside, if need be, he said. It would just be one more night, he thought, and he didn't feel comfortable up there on the 2nd floor. The couple exchanged glances, and Sidney said he'd think about it. Maybe on the patio outside the kitchen they could fix something up for him. I'd appreciate it, Son said. And would you do me one more favor? Could you let me eat in the kitchen with you all? They nodded, and Son left quickly, pleased, rather, that Sidney thought he was interested in Valerian's generosity. The house locked back together that evening and busied itself for Christmas. In Undine's kitchen, Son ate so much of her food she softened considerably toward him. Sidney was less accommodating than his wife, but he couldn't doubt the man's hunger, and his ways were quiet and respectful, almost erasing the memory of that high. By the time they finished eating and reminiscing about the States, Sidney was calling him Son. Valerian and Margaret and Jadine had eaten together in the dining room earlier, Sidney serving regally. Margaret was mollified by 2 telephone calls and a window view of the man who'd been in her closet, which made her feel, as Jadine apparently did now, that he was harmless. At any rate, he was not sleeping upstairs, she'd been informed by Jadine, nor eating with them. And maybe Michael would enjoy him if he was still on the property then, especially if B.J. didn't show. The travel agency said the ticket hadn't been picked up yet. She tried to hang on to her despair about Valerian, but it was hopeless. He was tickled to death by the sight of 4 cyclamen blossoms, so happy he was considering putting down mirrors for the ants. He'd gone around all morning beating up other plants, especially his miniature orange trees, which had come with no blossoms or fruit. He had even drafted a letter to the consulate, asking whether a B-class visa could be arranged for a local employee of his. And he spoke of Michael's visit as though it were a reality. They were amiable that evening, relaxed. Valerian cracked jokes that weren't funny back in the 50s. Margaret chattered and thought up extra niceties for the holidays, and ended by insisting that she would cook the Christmas dinner herself. It was to be a really old-fashioned Christmas, and that required the woman of the house to be bustling in the kitchen with an apron, roasting turkey and baking apple pie. Valerian should call the consulate. They would have some apples. They always got American produce. Valerian said she'd never made a crust in her life, and he wasn't looking forward to an experiment at Christmas. But Margaret wouldn't listen. She was hyper and happy. Michael was on his way. Valerian thought she had gone hog wild this time, but her cheer cheered him, and he encouraged rather than spoiled it. The quiet amiability lasted the whole evening, and there was rest in everybody's sleep that night, except Son's. He was swinging in a hammock outside in the night wind, with that woman on his mind. He had managed a face for everybody but her. The others were seduced by the Hickey Freeman suit and the haircut, but she was not, and neither was he. Not seduced at all. He didn't always know who he was, but he always knew what he was like. The soldier ants were not out in the night wind, neither were the bees. But heavy clouds grouped themselves behind the hills, as though for a parade. You could almost see the herd assemble, but the man swinging in the hammock was not aware of them. He was dwelling on his solitude, rocking in the wind, adrift. A man without human rights, unbaptized, uncircumcised, minus puberty rights, or the formal rights of manhood, unmarried and undivorced. He had attended no funeral, married in no church, raised no child, propertyless, homeless, sought for but not after. There were no grades given in his school, so how could he know when he had passed? He used to want to go down in blue water, down, down, then to rise and burst from the waves to see before him a single hard surface, a heavy thing, but intricate. He would enclose it, conquer it, for he knew his power then. And it was perhaps because the world knew it too that it did not consider him able. The conflict between knowing his power and the world's opinion of it secluded him, made him unilateral. But he had chosen solitude and the company of other solitary people, opted for it when everybody else had long ago surrendered. because he never wanted to live in the world their way. There was something wrong with the rights. He had wanted another way. Some other way of being in the world that he felt leaving him when he stood in the white towel, watching Yardman's, Gideon's back. But something had come loose in him, like the ball that looped around the roulette wheel, carried as much by its own weight as by the force of the wheel. In those 8 homeless years, he had joined that great underclass of undocumented men. And although there were more of his kind in the world than students or soldiers, unlike students or soldiers, they were not counted. They were an international legion of day laborers and muscle men, gamblers, sidewalk merchants, migrants, unlicensed crewmen on ships with volatile cargo, part-time mercenaries, full-time gigolos, or curbside musicians. What distinguished them from the other men, aside from their terror of Social Security cards and cédula de identidad, was their refusal to equate work with life, and an inability to stay anywhere for long. Some were Huck Finns, some Nigger Jims. Others were Calibans, Stagger Lees, and John Henrys. Anarchic, wandering, they read about their hometowns in the pages of out-of-town newspapers. Since 1971, Son had been seeing the United States through the international edition of Time, by way of shortwave radio and the views of other crewmen. It seemed sticky, loud, red, and sticky, its fields spongy, its pavements slick with the blood of all the best people. As soon as a man or woman did something generous or said something bold, pictures of their funeral lines appeared in the foreign press. It repelled him and made him suspicious of all knowledge he could not witness or feel in his bones. When he thought of America, he thought of the tongue that the Mexican drew in Uncle Sam's mouth, a map of the U.S. as an ill-shaped tongue, ringed by teeth and crammed with the corpses of children. The Mexican had presented it to him with a smile the day Son bashed the snapper's head in. "Americano," said the Mexican, and handed him the picture that he'd drawn in prison and kept in his locker. They were close to Argentina, and had been fishing off the prow that morning, pulling in snappers so rapidly they seemed to be leaping onto the deck. All but Son. The Swede and the Mexican, the two he was closest to, laughed at his spectacular bad luck. Suddenly a bite, and he reeled in a huge glitter of froth and steel. The friends watched admiringly as the fish flopped into death. But when Son bent down to remove the hook, the fish executed a dazzling final arc 3 feet above the deck and slapped his face. The Mexican and the Swede laughed like children, and Son, holding the tail down with his knee, bashed with his fist the snapper's head. The mouth pulped, and a little eye skittered across the deck. The Swede roared, but the Mexican was suddenly quiet, and later handed him the drawing, saying, "Americano. Cierto americano. Es verdad." And maybe it was so. In any case, if he was punching dying fish in anger, if he was pricked to fury by the outrageous claim of a snapper on its own life, stunned by its refusal to cooperate with his hook, to want, goddammit, to surrender itself for his pleasure, then perhaps he was cierto americano, and it was time to go home. Not to the sticky red place, but to his home in it. That separate place that was presided over by wide black women in snowy dresses and was ever dry, green, and quiet. There weren't going to be any impalas or water buffalo, no mating dance, no trophies. There was dice instead of tusk, a job when he wanted to journey. And the lion, he believed, was exclusive to his past, and his alone was frozen in stone, can you beat it, in front of the New York Public Library, in a city that had laughed at his private's uniform. Like an Indian seeing his profile diminished in a 5-cent piece, he saw the things he imagined to be his, including his own reflection, mocked, appropriated, marketed, and trivialized into decor. He couldn't give up the last thing left to him. Fraternity. On the ocean and in lockups, he had it. In tiny bars and shape-up halls, he had it. And if he was becoming cierto americano, he'd better go where he could never be deprived of it. Home. He wanted to go home, but that woman was on his mind. The one whose dreams he had tried to change, and whom he had insulted to keep her unhinging beauty from afflicting him and keeping him away from home. She is on my mind, he thought, but I'm not on hers. What must it be like to be on her mind? And he guessed the only way to know was to find out. The next morning, he asked her if she would like to eat lunch with him down on the beach, and she said, "Sure, I want to sketch down there before I go anyway." It surprised him into awkwardness, and the word "go" sent a ripple through him, exacerbating the awkwardness. She was getting ready to leave? Go somewhere? They took the Willies, and she drove, saying almost nothing. She sat quietly under the wheel, in an expertly crushed white cotton halter, and a wide, wide skirt that rich people called peasant, and peasants called wedding. Her skin damp and glowing against the Easter white cotton, all temptation and dare. When they got to the dock and parked, she jumped out with her sketch pad and box of pencils. He followed her with a basket, for she was leading the way, making little prints in the hard-packed sand. They walked about half a mile to a bend of good, clean sand and a clump of pineapple palms. They sat down, and she took off her canvas shoes. It was after they ate that carelessly assembled, hurriedly packed lunch that she seemed really aware of him, but only because she was opening her sketch pad and fiddling with the wooden box of pencils. She examined him then, with an intent but distant eye, and asked him a casual question, which he answered by saying, "My original dime. That's all, my original dime." The sun was hiding from them, and the mosquitoes were held off by a burning can of commercial repellent. The olives, French bread, uncuttable cheese, ham slices, jar of black mushy cherries, and wine left them both as hungry as they were when they'd started. It was a deliberately unappetizing lunch, which he had literally dumped into a beautiful brown and purple Haitian basket, as though to disabuse him of any idea that this was a real picnic, or that it was important to her. But they ate it all up and wished for more. It was probably that yearning for more that made Jadine ask him, "What do you want out of life?" A tiresome question of monumental ordinariness, the kind artists ask models while they measure the distance between forehead and chin, but one which he had apparently given some thought to. "My original dime," he said, "the one San Francisco gave me for cleaning a tub of sheephead." He was half sitting, half lying, propped upon his elbow facing her, with the sky-blue sky of the sky behind him. "Nothing I ever earned since was like that dime," he said. "That was the best money in the world, and the only real money I ever had. Even better than the $750 I won one time at craps. Now that felt good, you know what I mean, but not like that original dime did. Want to know what I spent it on? 5 cigarettes and a Dr. Pepper." 5 cigarettes? Yeah, they used to sell them loose in the country. That was my first personal store-bought purchase. You believe that? Wish you could have seen how it looked in the palm of my hand, shining there. The Dr. Pepper? The dime, girl, the dime. You know, I picked up money before, in the street, and a quarter once, on the riverbank. That was something, too, you know, really great. But nothing was ever like that sheephead dime. That original dime from Frisco. He paused for a comment from her, but she made none. She just kept busy behind the screen, the wall of her sketch pad. "Just before I left home, I heard he got blown up in a gas explosion." "Oh, Frisco." He murmured the name. son of a bitch. I heard about it on my way out of town, and I couldn't wait for the funeral. He worked in the gas field and got blown to bits. I left town crying like a baby. He was a nothing kind of dude, mind you, treated his wife like a dog and ran other women all over town. But I still cried when he got blown up, and I was a full-grown man. There must have been that dime. I mean, no money ever meant much to me after that. I couldn't work just for that, just for money. I like to have it, sure. It feels fine for a while, but there's no magic in it, no sheephead, no Frisco. And nothing to buy worth anything, anyway. I mean, nothing like 5 Chesterfield cigarettes and a Dr. Pepper. Talk about good. He threw his head back and directed his laughter into the sky. He was beautiful like that, laughing like that. Teeth, lips, mustache, perfect and perfectly disarming. Jadine paused. She couldn't draw his laughing, heaven-raised face. Well, anyway, I guess that's what I want, all I want in the money line. Something nice and simple and personal, you know? My original dime. Jadine's eyes followed the movements of her charcoal. Lazy. Really lazy. I never thought I'd hear a black man admit it. She rubbed the line with her thumb and frowned. I'm not admitting no such thing. Son's voice cracked with indignation. I got the sun in the morning and the moon at night. Jadine waggled her charcoal stick and rocked her head like trucking on down. Oh, I got plenty of nothing and nothing plenty for me. Son laughed in spite of himself. That's not lazy. What is it then? It's not being able to get excited about money. Get able. Get excited. What for? For you, for yourself, your future. Money isn't what the scramble's all about. It's what money does, can do. What can it do? Please, don't give me that transcendental Thoreau crap. Money is... Who's that? Who's who? Thoreau. Jesus. Don't look disgusted. I'm illiterate. You're not illiterate. You're stupid. So tell me, educate me. Who is he? Another time, okay? Just hold your head still and stop making excuses about not having anything. Not even your original dime. It's not romantic. And it's not being free. It's dumb. You think you're above it, above money, the rat race and all that, but you're not above it. You're just without it. It's a prison, poverty is. Look at what its absence made you do. Run, hide, steal, lie. Money didn't have anything to do with that. Sure it did. If you had some, you could have paid a lawyer, a good lawyer, and he would have gotten you off. You think like a kid. Maybe I didn't want to get off. Then what did you run away for? You told Undine you got into some trouble with the law and jumped bail. I didn't want to go to prison. But that's not the same thing. I didn't want their punishment. I wanted my own. Well, you got it. Yeah. And you might end up with theirs and yours. No way. You're like a baby. A big country baby. Anybody ever tell you that? No, nobody ever told me that. Well, you are. Like you were just born. Where are your family? Home, I guess. You don't know? I haven't been back in a long time. Where in Florida are you from? Elo. Elo? What on earth is that? A town? A town, yeah. God, I know it already. Gas stations, dust, heat, dogs, shacks, general store with ice coolers full of Dr. Pepper. No shacks in Elo. Tents, then. Trailer camps. Houses. There are 90 houses in Elo. All black. Black houses? Black people. No whites. No white people live in Elo. You're kidding me. I'm not. Black mayor? No mayor at all, black or white. Who runs it? Runs itself. Come on. Who pumps the water, hooks up the telephones? Oh, well, white folks do that. I'll bet they do. But they live in Ponce, Ferris, Sutterfield. Awful ways. I see. What work do these 90 black people do? 385. 90 houses. 385 people. Okay. What work do they do? They fish a little. Sheephead? Right? Oh, I got plenty of nothing. Don't laugh. They work in the gas field, too. In Ponce and Sutterfield. And they farm a little. God, Elo. Where's your home? Baltimore. Philadelphia. Paris. City girl. Believe it. Oh, I believe it. Were you ever in Philly? She put the pad and pencil down and rubbed her fingers together. Never. Just as well. Jadine dug her fingers in the sand, then brushed them. Not so hot? Well, better than Elo. Nothing's better than Elo. Oh, sure. When's the last time you were there? Long time. 8 years. 8, huh? You haven't seen your family in 8 years. Even your mother must have forgotten your name by now. She's been dead. My father raised her. He know your name? He knows it. Sure he knows it. I don't. What is it? I told you already. Everybody calls me son. I want to know what's on your birth certificate. No birth certificates in Elo. What about your Social Security card? That says son? No. That says William Green. At last. One of them, anyway. I got another that says Herbert Robinson. And one says Louis Stover. I got a driver's license that says, okay. But I can't call you son. Hi, son. Come here, son. I sound like a grandmother. Give me something else. You pick. Okay, I will. Let's see. I need something that fits. I know. I'll ask you a question. A question I want to ask anyway, and the best name will fit right in. Here I go. Why did you have to leave Elo on the run? Leave so fast you couldn't go to Frisco's funeral, Phil? That's good. That's anglicized French for son. Not Phil. Anything but Phil. Well, what then? What about Sugar? Why did you have to leave Elo on the run, Sugar? All right. What did you do to have to leave Elo on the run, Sugar? So fast, Sugar, you couldn't go to the funeral of the man who gave you your original dime. I killed somebody. Actually, he didn't look like a baby or even a big old country boy dressed up in a white man's suit. His hair was cut and his nails filed, but he had lived in the house and hid in the closet and pressed his face into her hair and his hips into the back of her skirt, and underneath the light cologne was a man with hair like snakes. It was hot, hazy and hot, a bad day for a picnic. Should I be scared? Asked Jadine. Not if you have to ask. I'm serious. So am I. Who was he, the man you killed? He stood up, untangling himself gracefully but swiftly. They always assumed that, he thought, that it was a man. Let's change the subject, he said. His voice was soft, a little sad, it seemed to her, and he gazed out into the water as he spoke. Fake, she thought. He's faking remorse, and he thinks I'm impressed by it. I hate killers, she said. All killers. Babies. They don't understand anything, but they want everybody to understand them. Lot of nerve, don't you think? Killing don't take nerve. It takes no nerve, no nerves at all. I don't feel sorry for you, you know. I think you ought to be in jail. So you can stop looking pitifully into the sea and thinking how terrible life's been to you. He glanced at her briefly, as though she were a distraction from the major work of looking at the sea. Sorry, he murmured. I didn't mean to. I wasn't thinking about me. I was thinking about the person I killed. And that is pitiful. Then why'd you do it? There is no why. The reason doesn't hold. I mean, it wasn't a good reason. It was a mistake. Sure, you didn't mean to, right? Oh, I meant to, but I didn't mean to. I meant the killing, but I didn't mean the death. I went too far. That's not so smart. Death frequently follows killing. Definitely unhip. Yeah. Temper, 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 she sang. He looked down at her again, wishing it had been temper. Something simple like that, or something forgivable like that. But he knew better. And for 8 years, wherever he looked, in the molten sea, in shape-up halls, in canneries, and on flophouse cots, he saw the mouth dying before the eyes did, when it should have been the other way around. And while he couldn't regret the fact that she was dead, he was ashamed of having been unable to look her in the eyes as she died. She deserved that. Everybody deserves that. That somebody look at them, with them, as they face death, especially the killer. But he had not had the courage or the sympathy, and it shamed him. He looked at Jadine. Now it was her turn to gaze into the sea. Who'd you kill? She said. A woman. I should have known. That's all you could think of to do with your life? Kill a woman? Was she black? Yes, of course she was. What did she do? Cheat on you? She said it ugly. Cheat. Like, take away your candy? He nodded. My. And you, I suppose, were the faithful boyfriend who never looked at another girl. Never. After I got out of the army, never. I played a little. Piano, at night. Nothing much, but okay, until I could get on at the gas field. I had this gig in Sutterfield. Off and on for about 3 months. Then one morning I came home and... No, thanked Jadine. Don't tell me. You found her with somebody else and shot her. No. Yes, I found her. That way. But I didn't go in. I left. I got in the car. I was just gonna drive off, and I backed the car out in the road, but I couldn't leave. Couldn't leave them there, so I turned the car around and drove it through the house. You ran over them? Jadine's upper lip was lifted in disgust. No, I just busted up the place. But the car exploded, and the bed caught fire. It was a little place we had, just a little box, and I drove through the bedroom wall. I pulled her out of the fire, but she never made it. They booked me after that. What about the man? It wasn't a man, it was a boy. 13, I heard. Singed him bald, but nothing more. They had me up for murder, too. He was still standing, and now he looked down at her and noticed that she had folded her legs under her white cotton skirt. She was scared, he thought. In the company of a killer on an island, far away from the house, she is too scared. Suddenly, he liked it, liked her fear. Basked in it like a cat in steam pipe heat, and it made him feel protective and violent at the same time. She was looking into the horizon and kept her legs hidden under her skirt. Does she think I'll cut them off, or is there something under there she is afraid I will take out and kill? The idea both alarmed and pleased him. And he dropped down on one knee and said very softly, "I won't kill you. I love you." Quick, like a doe, she turned her head. Her eyes stretched wide with the problem of deciding what to be outraged by, the promise or the confession. "You better not do either one," she said. "I don't want you loving me, and don't threaten me either. Don't ever threaten me again." "I wasn't threatening you. I said I won't. Wouldn't." "Why would you even say that? What kind of man are you? People don't say things like that. Nobody says that. Where do you think we are, in some jungle? Why would you say you're not going to kill me?" "Shh." "I won't shh. You can't just sit here on the sand and say something like that. You're trying to scare me." She's bolting, he thought. I've disgusted her again. And it was true that she was looking at him as though he were a dwarf, with a head lopsided and swollen with water. She's right, he thought. I am crazy. Whenever I try to tell the truth, it comes out wrong, or dumb, or scary, and there was no way to hide his helpless, naked face. "No, wait a minute. I wasn't trying to scare you. I was trying to comfort you." "Comfort me?" "Yeah, you tucked your legs in like you were scared of me. You don't have to tuck your legs in. I mean, what are you talking about? You changed the way you were sitting." "You thought I sat this way because I was afraid?" "Okay. I was wrong. But I didn't say it to say maybe I could, but I won't. I said it so you wouldn't think that I would, or... I'm not a killer. Just that one time, accidentally, when I was fucked up. I just didn't want to see your legs folded up like that. I wanted you relaxed, like you were before. You were sassy before, and rubbing your ankles with your hands." Jadine looked at him, trying to figure out whether he was the man who understood potted plants or the man who drove through houses.
This ends side 2 of cassette 5 of Tar Baby. Please fast forward to the end before loading cassette 6.